We're jumping right in because today we're strictly examining the biological and neurological science behind a deeply complex topic, fetal pain. We're going to completely strip away the outside noise and focus purely on the objective, scientific evidence regarding how the nervous system actually develops. We'll explore exactly what it takes biologically to feel pain. We'll compare fetal sensory capabilities directly to what we know about adult medicine, and we'll map out a really simple, clear timeline of the key stages in neurological maturation.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We've got 5 sections. Section 1 is what is pain. Section 2 covers neurological hardware. Section 3 is the maturation timeline. Section 4 is the fetal versus adult experience. And we'll wrap up with Section 5, medical and statistical context. Let's kick things off with Section 1, what is pain? The sensory and emotional spectrum.
So, before we can even begin to talk about fetuses, we have to precisely define what pain actually is in a clinical sense. For that, we look to the International Association for the Study of Pain, or the IASP. They define pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with or resembling that associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Now, what's really important here is that this definition brilliantly illustrates how pain isn't just a physical flinch, right? It's deeply emotional. It's a psychological experience that's inextricably linked to how our minds process the world around us.
And what's really fascinating about this is how our medical understanding of pain has evolved over time. Pain actually has a learned psychological aspect to it. For example, studies show that premature babies who have already been exposed to a painful stimulation show evidence of being significantly more stressed out when that exact same procedure is repeated later on, especially when compared to babies of the exact same age who hadn't experienced it before. They literally learn. Now, this is a massive shift from medical history. Believe it or not, until the late 1980s, there was this prevailing and entirely incorrect belief in the medical community that even born newborns couldn't feel pain because their brains were considered quote-unquote underdeveloped. Thankfully, modern science knows better. Moving right along to Section 2, neurological hardware. Building the network. Let's look inside the developing brain to see exactly what is required to actually process these pain signals. It helps to think of the brain kind of like a highly advanced computer. In the early stages of fetal development, the brain simply doesn't have the necessary hardware and software to support conscious pain perception. Two absolutely crucial pieces of this hardware are the cortex, which is the outer layer of the brain involved in perceiving pain, and the thalamus, which is basically a structure that acts as a relay station, sending sensory information up to the cortex. In early development, these subcortical areas and the synaptic connections between them, well, they're simply not fully mature yet.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this concept, the human pain connectome. Science now recognizes that perceiving pain requires a comprehensive, brain-wide network. It's not just about having one specific region present or flipping a single biological switch on or off. True conscious pain relies on this massive, interconnected web of neurological hardware firing together in sync. Without that entire connectome up and running, conscious perception is highly unlikely.
That brings us to Section 3, the maturation timeline. Step-by-step development. So, you're probably wondering, when does this connectome actually come online? Let's walk through the chronological arc step by step. At around 7 to 8 weeks of gestation, the very early neural pathways necessary for perception just start to appear. Fast forward to 12 to 15 weeks, and pain receptors and spinal cord connections physically link up to the brain. But remember our hardware analogy from earlier? Just because the wires are there doesn't mean the computer is actually running. It's not until 24 to 25 weeks that major medical organizations note fetuses actually start responding to noxious or harmful stimuli with things like increased heart rate and blood pressure. And it's really at 28 to 30 weeks that we actually see visible brain activity in the areas associated with pain processing. Because of this really gradual build, current evidence strongly indicates that conscious pain perception before 28 weeks is highly unlikely. Let's transition to section 4, fetal versus adult experience, comparing perception.
It's super helpful to compare these early stages directly with mature medical knowledge. The adult experience of pain, as we all know, is a fully conscious perception. It is inextricably linked to our emotions. Factors like anxiety, fear, depression, and past trauma completely change how an adult feels pain. The fetal experience, on the other hand, is vastly different. Because the fetal brain is essentially a gradual work in progress, their experience is characterized by unconscious stress signals and purely physiological responses, like those changes in heart rate we talked about. Even if a fetus at later stages can feel pain, medical science makes it very clear that they likely don't experience it with anywhere near the emotional and cognitive complexity that an adult does.